Where can you go in Glasgow to find a link to the world's most famous shipwreck? And what was the deadliest shipwreck to happen on the Clyde? Find out now in this episode of Astonishing Glasgow. It has been a few episodes since I was in a graveyard. It has also been a few episodes since I talked about Glasgow's shipbuilding heritage. But that is about to change as I start this episode on Paisley Road West. This is Craigton Cemetery on the city's south side. It was laid out in 1871 to serve the southwest of Glasgow, Govan and Partick, and it covers around 30 acres. Because of its location, it was the final resting place for many shipyard workers, preachers, doctors and those connected with Rangers Football Club. One person who was memorialised in Craigton will be a familiar name if you have watched past episodes of Astonishing Glasgow. Sir William Pearce has been mentioned in episode 44, where his statue stands on Govan Cross, and he was mentioned in episode 50 when I talk about him paying to save parts of the 15th century Glasgow University building and then move it to its current location as the Pearce Lodge in the West End. In Craigton Cemetery, his wife Lady Pearce bought a 50-foot plot to erect a monument to Sir William Pearce after his death in 1888. He wasn't buried here, but he had been such an important figure in the Govan community that Lady Pearce wanted to gift a monument as a token of her appreciation for the high esteem that the people of Govan held her husband. The monument was huge, built from sandstone and granite, and I would love to be able to show you it. But in the 1970s, workmen arrived one morning to restore the monument. Unfortunately, it was all a con. They removed the bronzes for scrap, and due to the damage they caused, the monument had to be demolished just 6 years later. I am so angry about this I could crush a grape. So I couldn't show you the Pearce Memorial, but I can show you another memorial in the graveyard that doesn't contain the person's remains. This is the grave of Annie Bell, who died in 1906, leaving her husband, the Reverend John Harper, and their daughter Annie Jessie, known as Nan. After his wife's death, John moved to London to preach at the Walworth Road Baptist Church. Then in 1912, he was asked to return to the Moody Church in Chicago, where he had been the year before for a few weeks. John, his daughter and his niece set off for America on the 10th of April 1912 as second-class passengers on board the Titanic. As we know, it wasn't a particularly successful voyage, as the Titanic struck an iceberg on the 14th of April. John made sure that his daughter and his niece were on board a lifeboat, then returned to the main deck of the sinking ship to preach the Gospels to calm the remaining passengers. Survivors say that even as the ship sank below the surface, Reverend John Harper was seen in the water, swimming between the frightened and the weak, offering comfort. He was soon consumed by the icy waters after giving up his life jacket to save another. His daughter survived the disaster and returned to Glasgow on the 10th of December 1921 to open the Harper Memorial Baptist Church on Craigie Hall Street. John's body was never recovered, so he is not buried here, but his legacy lives on and his story is told in more detail in the book, The Titanic's Last Hero, the story of John Harper. The last monument we will visit in the graveyard is this tall, narrow obelisk, which marks the gravesite of 50 victims of another shipwreck. Not quite on the same scale as the Titanic disaster, but this sinking took place a lot closer to home. To tell this story, I need to cycle down closer to Govan, and the shipyard of Alexander Stephen and Sons. The only part of the yard to survive in its original location is the main office block on Holmfald Road, right beside the Clyde tunnel. I'm currently standing at the front of the office block, and the rest of the yard would have stretched out behind. I've used this map slider function on the National Library of Scotland's website to show just how much has changed. I've placed a red dot on the Clyde Tunnel entrance and a blue dot on the drawing office. So when I overlay this map from 1914, you can see where the yard sat and where the slipways where the ships were launched once were. I'm going to make my way now down to where this white dot is on the map to see if there are any traces of the yard left. The land is now occupied by the police helicopter landing pad and the Thales Optronics facility, but at the back of the car park, right in the corner through the brambles and the stinging nettles, not much fun in shorts, is the last bit of slipway, and it is right here in 1883 where disaster struck. On July the 3rd, 1883, the steamship Daphne was ready to be launched. As the SS Daphne slipped into the Clyde, there were around 200 workers on board, ready to start fitting out the hull once she was afloat. As she slid into the Clyde though, there was an issue with the drag chains. They were meant to slow her down, but the starboard anchor moved only 6 metres, and the port anchor, it moved around 50 metres, causing the ship to become unstable and to roll over into the river and capsize. 124 people would die that day, either on board the ship or being swept downstream by the current. Onlookers and shipyard workers managed to save around 70 of the people who had been on board. That even included a dentist who had stowed away after persuading a friend to get him on board for the launch. It took 2 full weeks to recover all the bodies from the hull, and from that point on, numbers of people on board during a launch were strictly limited. The Daphne was refloated and repaired at the graving docks in Govan, before being renamed the SS Rose. An appeal fund was set up on the 25th of July to raise £40,000 for the 60 widows and 150 children who were dependents of the men who died on board the SS Daphne. This Daphne Memorial was erected here in Craigton Cemetery in 1885, paid for by the Associated Shipwrights. It was put here in memory of their members who had lost their lives in the disaster, and around 50 of the victims are buried right here in compartments around the memorial. The inscription on the base reads, "A sudden change, we in a moment fell. We had not time to bid our friends farewell. Think this not strange? Death happens to us all. This day was ours, tomorrow we may fall." Now we're not quite finished this episode yet, as there are 2 more memorials to the victims of the SS Daphne. But they're not in Craigton Cemetery, so I need to head off into the city to find those. The first stop is in Elder Park in Govan. Elder Park was gifted to the people of Govan by Isabella Elder, who I talk all about in episode 22, and just behind her statue is the first of the memorials to the Daphne Disaster. Sadly, it is very overgrown, surrounded by broken glass, and the information panel is completely covered by a sticker. But it is there if you know where to look. Now before I leave Elder Park, this portico is the last remaining part of the Linthouse mansion. It was the Linthouse estate that Alexander Stephen bought to build his shipyard, and the house was used as the company offices and the model maker's shop at the time the Daphne was being built in the yard. The house was demolished in 1921, but the doorway thought to have been designed by the architect Robert Adam, was saved and re-erected here in Elder Park. It's just a pity that it's so overgrown and neglected now. For the last SS Daphne Memorial in the city, I need to cross to the north side of the Clyde. This is Victoria Park, and as well as housing Fossil Grove, it also features a matching plaque to the Elder Park Daphne Memorial. But this one is in a lot nicer condition and is in a far nicer setting. It can also be read as it's not covered with a sticker. So apologies for this episode being all doom and gloom, but it's important to remember the city's dark days as well as the good ones. It's now time for me to start the long cycle home, and this involves using the Clyde tunnel. Whilst I do, please hit that like and subscribe button. 85% of those watching my videos don't subscribe, so please hit that button. It really does help a lot, and it helps more people find my channel. If you would like to support the channel and help me make more episodes, you can leave a donation via the Super Thanks button. Every penny is appreciated, and these are the superstars who donated after the last episode. You can also grab some merch over in the Spread Shop channel. All the links are down below in the description. And remember, you can get in touch through the comments or via the social media pages. Again, all the links are below this video in the description. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time in Astonishing Glasgow. Right, I'm away for some Victoria sponge and an ice cream float. See you later.